Hey there nation, and welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate, and we're back with another episode of Way of the Underhive. This series is dedicated to helping brand new players to Necromunda build their starting rosters and learn more about the game mechanics of their favorite gangs. And on today's episode, we will discuss the Promethium Guild Outcast Gang that you guys can bring out into your campaigns of the Ash Wastes. Now, since the Ash Wastes have opened up and now players are now starting to play out in those wastelands, taking an Outcast gang, especially an Outcast gang that uses a Merchant Guild delegation, is actually a very viable option now. And the reason why is because a lot of the weaknesses that a delegation gang might have had in the Underhive has been mitigated now because of vehicles and heavy weapons that you can bring out into the Ash Waste as well. At the same time, taking an Outcast gang, you can customize archetypes for your champions as well as for your leaders. You can get them additional equipment, etc. So because of that, we will be discussing the strengths and weaknesses of playing a Promethium Guild Outcast gang. We'll talk about their fighters as well as their playstyle and provide you critical information that you can use in your campaign. And then finally, we will also show you a starting roster valued at 1,400 credits that you can put together for your very first Ash Waste campaign. So with that being said, let's get this video on a roll. Alright, so let's talk about the strengths of actually playing an Outcast delegation gang from the Merchant Guild. So the strengths that you have, of course, are potentially it's one of the most powerful starting gangs in a campaign to use a delegation gang. And the reason why is because a lot of these delegation gangs start off with excellent equipment and skills for almost all their fighters right from the start. So that's actually one of the nice ways about that. You can start with better weapons, better equipment, better skills, in some cases even better stats with some of your fighters than your opponents will, which gives you a really good edge at the beginning of a campaign. At the same time, you can also take advantage of the new weird disciplines that came out from the book of the Outcasts, and you can actually use those weird disciplines out in the Ash Waste as well. So that part is really cool too. Now, probably the biggest strength that's actually impacted Outcast delegation gangs the most has probably been the access to vehicles, especially vehicles with heavy weapons and special weapon options on those vehicles. Some of these delegations actually really suffered from things like lack of heavy weaponry or speed or maneuverability or whatever the case may be. So vehicles with these heavy weapons really give these delegation gangs a real advantage out in the Ash Wastes of Necromunda. So now that we're done talking about the strengths of playing a delegation gang, let's go and talk about the weaknesses. Alright, so perhaps the biggest weakness of actually playing a delegation gang that's an Outcast gang is that you cannot take any alliances whatsoever. If you decide to use the delegation as the core of your gang, no alliances are available to you. So for example, if you're a Merchant Guild delegation gang, you can't take criminal alliances or noble house alliances, and vice versa for all the other ones as well. So that's one of the biggest weaknesses of playing a delegation gang. If you really like using alliances to help your gang out, this might not be the one for you. However though, like I said before in the strengths, it does give you a leg up in the actual beginning of a campaign because you have better fighters, better equipment, and better skills. Now, one of the weaknesses of this game, of course, is that if you decide to play WYSIWYG, which is an acronym for what you see is what you get type of gangs, this can be quite pricey in my opinion. And the reason why is because, for example, if you were to play a Nauticin siphoning delegation, for example, as the core of your gang, and you want to buy the Forge World miniatures in order to fill that gang, those Forge World miniatures can be quite expensive. So because of that, I would suggest looking for cheaper alternatives or convert your own in most cases. A lot of these delegations have not been manufactured yet, so you could possibly do that, but that's just something you might want to take into account. Me, of course, I would never actually do that. I would just convert my own or find alternate ways to get cheaper miniatures, and that's the thing I would keep in mind when I would be playing a delegation gang. At the same time, these gangs are also very expensive to field in terms of credits. These delegations, like I said, have a lot of skills, a lot of weapons, better stats, and you're going to pay for those. For example, I think the cheapest of the delegations starts off at like 540 credits, I believe. So because of that, it's going to be very, very expensive for you to fill these fighters, but that's the way it goes. And lastly, probably the biggest weakness of actually playing an Outcast delegation gang is that you do have to be aware of the balance bandwagon. A lot of balance bandwagon types will scream overpowered or game breaking or unfair and so on and so forth. But of course, once again, just ignore those immaturity of those players, drink the salt of their tears, and just use that to power yourself in destroying your enemies. So these are some of the strengths and weaknesses involved with playing a delegation gang. Alright, so when it comes to delegation gangs, once again, you get to pick from merchant guilds, criminal syndicates, or noble houses, and use those delegations you get from those alliances to form the core of your gang. Leaders also get archetypes and affiliations depending on what delegation you choose. Also, champions also get archetypes as well, so that allows for a lot of customization for your different members of your delegations depending on the affiliations and the archetypes that you choose. Now, once again, remember, archetypes depend on what kind of primary and secondary skills your champions and your leaders receive, while affiliations usually determine what kind of weapons and equipment you can get from the starting list, if not from the trading post as well. At the same time, the nice thing about these delegations is that the members of those delegations gain experience and they can purchase weapons and equipment over time, just like any other gang. So that part is really, really cool. And once again, I have to make sure I stress this a lot. If you decide to take a Delegation Outcast Gang, you cannot make any alliances whatsoever in the future. So just be aware when that actually happens and keep that in mind. Alright, so the last thing we're going to do real quick is talk about which specific merchant guilds you can actually take delegations for in order to create your Outcast gang. So there are 5 delegations from the merchant guilds that you can actually use to make your core of your gang. If you'll notice, the Guild of Iron is not on here, and the reason why is because the Guild of Iron consists of D3 plus 2 Hive Scum, so they really didn't have any unique delegations for them. However, from the list that you can choose from, you can either choose the Pyromantic Conclave to be the core of your gang, you could use the Nautican Siphoning Delegation to be the core of your gang, you could use the Slaver Entourage from the Slavers Guild, the Corpse Harvesting Party from the Corpse Guild, or the Toll Collectors from the Guild of Coin. And depending on which of these delegations you choose will form the core of your gang, as well as what skills and weapons and equipment they have. Now, it should be mentioned that whatever war gear, equipment, and weapons that these delegations have, you can also use those items to outfit your Outcast Champions as well as your Hive Scum with those same weapons as well. So if you can't get things normally from the trading post or from the starting lists, you can get it from there because purpose of the fact that your delegation can share those materials with the rest of your gang as well. So now that we're done talking about the delegation gangs as well as the merchant guild delegations you can choose from, let's go ahead and talk about your specific merchant guild on the next slide. Alright, so first of all, let's go ahead and talk about the Pyromantic Conclave. This is the delegation that you'd use as the core of your gang when you create your Promethium Guild Outcast Gang. Now, the Pyromantic Conclave is going to cost you 460 credits, and with those 460 credits, you guys will be getting a Pyrocaen Lord, a Pyromagir, as well as 2 Cinders. Now, the Pyromantic Conclave is actually pretty good. The reason why is because if you're outnumbered by your opponents, it's really going to help you out because all the members of the Conclave are equipped with Photon Flash Grenades. Now, in case you're unfamiliar how Photon Flash Grenades work, what you do is you throw that towards your opponents, they take an initiative test. If they fail that initiative test, they automatically lose their ready marker for that turn. So it's excellent for crowd control because if your opponent can't activate fighters, they lose any actions for that round, and so you could really storm across your opponent, especially with the type of weapons that you have access to. The Pyromantic Conclave has access to flamers that you can purchase for your gang really quickly from the Outcast, as well as shock staves, which are also pretty good close combat weapons as well. You probably will be focusing more on the flamers because they actually have the most utility for your gang, and so because of that, you'll be able to purchase those for your gang right off the bat because it comes to your delegation, and you can really spam those flamer template weapons against your opponents. So now that we're done talking about the Pyromantic Conclave itself, let's go ahead and talk about your individual fighters. Alright, so first of all, we're going to talk about the Pyrocaen Lord. The Pyrocaen Lord costs you 140 credits, and this is the leader for your gang as well from your Conclave. So let's talk about the stats real quick. So the Pyrocaen Lord has a 4-inch movement characteristic, a 3+ weapon skill, 4+ ballistic skill. They have 3 strength, 3 toughness. They also have 2 wounds. They have 4+ initiative, 1 attack. They also have 7 leadership, 7 cool, 7 willpower, as well as 6 intelligence. So when it comes to your Pyrocaen Lord, they actually have some pretty good, decent stats for a starting leader. They're pretty much on par with most gang leaders in terms of their weapons and weapon skill, ballistic skill, as well as their psychological traits. So because of that, it's actually a pretty good leader for that part. Originally, the psychological stats didn't really matter all that much because your Pyrocaen Lord was part of the entourage that was sent, the delegation that was sent to ally your gang. So you really have to focus on them too much, but now you're using them as a leader for a gang, it kind of changes things away. Now, one of the things about this is that when you choose your archetype for your leader, I suggest you go with the Survivor archetype. And the reason why I would go with the Survivor archetype is because it comes with the Nerves of Steel skill from that, because you'll be able to use Ferocity as a primary skill. Now, the reason why you want Nerves of Steel for is because, unfortunately, your Pyrocaen Lord is going to be a target. Your opponent is going to be shooting at your leader quite often and trying to take him out. And the reason why that is the case is because your Pyrocaen Lord does come with Overseer skill right off the bat. And anyone knows how powerful Overseer skill can be, especially if you're using it on fighters who can use template weapons. It becomes extremely powerful. So because of that, you're going to need that Nerves of Steel skill so that way you can escape pinning by rolling a 7+ on your cool. Now, 7+ on cool is kind of average, but in all fairness though, it's actually pretty decent. It's about a 50-50 chance of actually getting that, and that's always a nice way to escape pinning, so that way you can actually do more actions later on with your Pyrocaen Lord. At the same time, even though they do have some mediocre stats, they do have some pretty excellent equipment. For the Pyrocaen Lord, they're armed with a shock stave, so they do got that versatile attack, plus they also get that +1 strength to that attack, and they have the shock characteristic trait put on that weapon as well. You could definitely use it in your ride-by rolls, which is actually kind of nice as well. You also have a Refractor field too, that also gives you 5-up ward save against attacks. Now you do have to roll a d6 every single time you use it, and if you roll a 1 it runs out of power, but that's only a 1/6 chance of failing, and it's a 5-up ward save, which is all kinds of good. At the same time, you also have a Laspistol too for self-defense, which is a pretty average weapon. However, the thing that makes the Pyrocaen Lord so dangerous is the skills that they have. Now, evade, of course, is kind of helpful because it helps avoid being shot at, but the main skill that's really going to help you out is Overseer. Overseer, in case you're unfamiliar, allows your character to take a double action to use Overseer, and they can pick a fighter within range about 12 inches. When they pick that fighter, they can do double sets of activations. Alright, so that means they get to do 2 sets of actions in a turn, which means that if you pair this guy with the Pyromagir, which is the guild champion that actually arms the Flamer, this person can fire their Flamer twice because they can use 1 basic action and 1 activation to fire that Flamer, and then another activation to fire that Flamer as well. And depending on how you equip your Pyromagir with skills, you can actually fire that thing up to 4 times per activation when using Overseer, which is extremely powerful because having strength 4 template weapons, just blasting opponents with that thing, very, very deadly and very, very frightening to go up against. And on that topic, let's go ahead and talk about your Pyromagir. Your Pyromagir is going to be one of your champions for your gang. That fighter is going to cost you 220 credits. And for their stats, let's go ahead and talk about that real quick. They're going to have a 4-inch movement allowance, 4+ ballistic skill, 4+ weapon skill, 5+ ballistic skill. They have 3 strength, 3 toughness. They have 1 wound, 4+ initiative, 1 attack. They have 7 leadership, 8 cool, 7 willpower, as well as 7 intelligence. And like I said before, these are going to be one of your champions that you use automatically when you actually create your Delegation Gang. And the best archetype to use for this fighter, in my opinion, is the Gunfighter archetype. And the reason why you want the Gunfighter archetype is because you want that fast shot skill that comes in the shooting tree. What that's going to allow you to do is going to allow your Pyromagir to actually fire their Flamer twice, because firing a weapon becomes a simple action instead of a basic action. And as you all know, you can do 2 simple actions per activation. And this is where I was talking about earlier about how you can fire that Flamer up to 4 times, because for your first set of activations, when you have Overseer put on them, your Pyromagir can open fire with their Flamer twice in that 1 activation, and then they'll be able to do it again a second time, making them be able to fire up to 4 times that Flamer and really suppress your enemy and set your opponents on fire. So because of that, your character comes with Flamer, which is the main weapon you're going to be using, as well as your Stubgun, as well as a cult icon, which is kind of nice because then you can group activate 2 other fighters. Now, you do have a Refractor field, which also makes them really good too, because you get that 5-up ward save, and you also got mesh armor as well, so that makes you have a 5-up armor save, a 5-up ward save on top of that. That Flamer firing off 4 times, especially if you combine it with the Overseer ability. Not to mention, he also comes with Nerves of Steel skills, so that way you can skip pinning by passing a cool test. This guy is absolutely deadly in close quarters battle, especially if you want to use him defensively. If you're mounted on a vehicle, for example, like a large class vehicle like a Cargo 8 Ridge Hauler, you could use your Pyromagir to just open fire with that Flamer and just take out opponents left and right and keep them from actually boarding your vehicle at any time as well. Not to mention, if you don't put Overseer on him, he does have that cult icon, which will be good to activate the 2 Cinders that come with your delegation as well, and that's always nice to have that larger group activations as well. And that pretty much makes up my take on the Pyromagir. Alright, so the last fighter we're going to talk about are your Cinders. You actually get 2 Cinders in your delegation, and these are counted as being Ganger level fighters. You get 2 of these guys, and they cost 45 credits apiece. So let's go and talk about their stats real quick. So the Cinders come with a 4-inch movement allowance, 4+ ballistic skill, 4+ weapon skill rather, 5+ ballistic skill. They have 3 strength, 3 toughness. They have 1 wound, 4+ for initiative, 1 attack. They have 8 leadership, 8 cool, 7 willpower, as well as 7 intelligence. Now, like I said before, they are your gangers, and you actually get 2 of these guys, and they're armed with Laspistols and axes, or Laspistols and mauls. In my opinion, you should always go with the axes instead of the maul, because you get a +1 strength for your attack when you use an axe as well. Now, while their skills may not be all that great, because they have a 5+ ballistic skill and a 4+ weapon skill, they are perfect to be used as human shields in order to protect either your Pyrocaen Lord or your Pyromagir, which is basically what they're designed to be. They're supposed to be designed as human shields that can defend those 2 major characters. And that's how you originally used them when you had guild alliances. But since you're using them as gangers in your Outcast Gang, they can actually have an enhanced position in your gang as well. Not only can you use them as human shields to protect your more valuable fighters, but you can also use them to spam Photon flash grenades. So because of that, like I said before, if you throw those Photon flash grenades directly towards your enemies, you could actually deactivate them so they lose their ready markers. That way you can take full advantage of that. You can also hire better Outcast Champions and Outcast Hive Scum in order to do the fighting once those guys have been deactivated, and that could really be a very powerful combination to take out your enemies. So having this Cinder actually synergizes well in relationship to the other Outcast Champions and Outcast Hive Scum that you have in your gang, and depending on how you get those guys out for your list, they can actually cause a lot of chaos and a lot of destruction as well in combination with those Photon flash grenades. So now that we're done talking about the Cinders for the Promethium Guild, let's go and talk about your Outcast Champions and your Outcast Hive Scum. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about the Underhive Outcast Champion real quick. For these gangs, these guys cost 60 credits apiece, and for their stats, they have 5-inch movement, 3+ weapon skill, 4+ ballistic skill. They have 3 strength, 3 toughness. They also have 2 wounds, they have 4 initiative, 1 attack. They have 6 leadership, 7 cool, 8 willpower, as well as 8 intelligence. So let's go on and talk about these guys real quick. So when it comes to the Underhive Outcast Champions, they're very versatile, and the reason why is because their stats are pretty much mediocre. Now that's both a good and a bad thing. While it might be bad because they can't excel at any one given thing, whether it's shooting or close combat, it does allow them to be able to equip a large variety of weapons and fulfill any role that you need them to fulfill within your gang as well. Now when it also comes to your guys' Underhive Outcast Champions, archetypes of course are very, very important. But the problem with these guys though is that their archetypes are very limited for their skills in my opinion. For example, they have 5 different archetypes they can choose from, but they only have 1 primary skill, and each of those archetypes followed by 2 secondaries. So for example, if you were to take the Brawler archetype, Brawn would be your primary with Ferocity and Leadership as your secondaries. If you were a Gunslinger archetype, Shooting would be your primary with Agility as well as Leadership as your secondaries. For a Survivor archetype, Ferocity would be your primary, followed by Combat and Leadership for your secondaries. For Mastermind, Cunning would be your primary, with Leadership and Savant as your secondaries. And of course, for weird archetypes, your Psychic Disciplines would be your primary, followed by Cunning and Leadership as your secondaries. Unfortunately for the Champion, there are no archetypes where combat is a primary, so that is kind of limiting on what you can do. So you won't be getting any skills really to increase your combat abilities, but better weapons and equipment choices could probably help out with that as well. Now when it comes to their equipment and weapons, they can purchase pretty much anything they want to off the trading post so long as it's within the rarity value of 8 on the trading post. So they are kind of limited in some of their choices, but the reason why that is the case is because you can take 1 champion for every 3 Hive Scum in your gang. So for example, if you have 6 Hive Scum in your gang, you can take 2 champions. If you got 9 Hive Scum, you can get 3 champions, and etc. So that's basically where the trade-off kind of comes in. And then finally, of course, we have our Underhive Outcast Hive Scum, which is your typical ganger and juvie level fighter for your gang. These guys cost 30 credits apiece. For their stats, they have 5-inch movement, 4+ weapon skill and ballistic skill, 3 strength and toughness. They have 1 wound, 4+ for initiative, 1 attack. They have 8+ for leadership, cool, willpower, and intelligence. And for their skill access, when they become a specialist, their primary is cunning, with ferocity as their secondary. Now, Underhive Scum, Outcast Scum, they're very mediocre, okay? But because of that, they're also very cheap to field. And even though they have very mediocre stats, they count as both gangers and juvie level fighters for your gang, and because their stats are still so mediocre, they can fulfill many different roles in your gang. You can equip them as shooters, close combat, you can use them as support, you can use them as suicide bombers, especially now that you can also put them on Waster dirt bikes. They make great pursuers on Waster dirt bikes, for example. So there's a variety of things you can do with these guys to fulfill pretty much any role that you want to. And plus, if you decide to make it into a delegation gang, you can also take better weapons equipment from the delegation lists as well. So that's another cool thing about Outcast Hive Scum as well. Now, unfortunately, you cannot start your campaign with an Outcast specialist, so that part is kind of sad. Almost every single gang can have a specialist except for Outcast, so that part is kind of sad. But that's the kind of the trade-off. Yes, you can't get those specialists, but right at the start. But you have so many guys you can choose from, and plus your delegations could fulfill those roles anyways, so it's not that big of an issue. So that makes up your guys' Outcast Hive Scum. Alright, so now that we're done talking about your fighters, let's go ahead and talk about the starting roster for this one. I call it the Gastown Pyromantic Conclave Gang, and this is going to cost you 1,400 credits. So first of all, you're going to have a Pyrocaen Lord, it's going to cost you 155 credits. You're going to give them the Survivor Archetype, as well as purchase Mesh Armor for them for additional defense. They're going to be equipped with their Laspistol, their Shock Stave, as well as their Photon Flash Grenades, as well as a Refractor Field. And you have, of course, have their Overseal and Evade skill, but you're going to add that Nerves of Steel skill on there as well, just because you're going to need that from being shot against all the time, because your opponent doesn't want you to use Overseer. Next, after that, you have your Pyromagir. Your Pyromagir costs 220 credits, and they just come stock as you would when you purchase them from your delegation. They come with a Gunslinger Archetype, and their armor with a Flamer, a Stubgun, Photon Flash Grenades, a Cult Icon, as well as a Refractor Field. They have Nerves of Steel, and you're going to give them Fast Shot ability as well, so that way they can fire that Flamer up to 4 times if they get Overseer put on them. After that, you're going to have 2 Outcast Champions. Outcast Champion number 1 is going to cost you 220 credits. This fighter has the Gunslinger Archetype as well as Mesh Armor. They're also equipped with Flamer. They also have a Stubgun and once again a Fast Shot ability. Kind of like a copy from the Pyromagir, so that way they can actually be spamming 4 shots of that Flamer if they do get a Overseer put on them. But if not, they can fire twice, so that's still pretty deadly. Then you have your Outcast Champion number 2. It's going to cost you 160 credits. This fighter has the Gunslinger Archetype as well as Mesh Armor, and this time they're carrying a Hand Flamer and an Axe, and they have the Fast Shot ability. The Hand Flamer is kind of nice. It's a weaker version of the Flamer, but it's still a template weapon, and you will be able to shoot it twice, which is awesome as well. I suggest when the timing is appropriate, buy this guy a second Hand Flamer, so that way they can fire twice with their that way they can fire 4 times with their Hand Flamers, and 8 times if you manage to put Overseer on them, which is super deadly as well. Now after that, you got your 2 Cinders. Cinders number 1 and 2. They both cost 45 credits apiece. They both have Laspistols, they both have Axes, they both have Photon Flash Grenades, and they both have their Spring of abilities. And then lastly, you got 3 Outcast Hive Scum. They're all equipped exactly the same. Hive Scum 1, 2, and 3 all going to cost you 45 credits apiece. They're armed with Stub Guns for close range shooting, as well as Axes for +1 strength. And then finally, for your vehicle on this one, you're going to hire a Guild of Coin hauler. It's going to cost you 420 credits. So you are taking 20 credits away from your gang and putting on this vehicle, but with those 20 extra credits, you're giving yourself a Cargo 8 Ridge hauler with a Promethium tank, as well as reinforced armor for +1 toughness, tire claws for +1 handling, smoke vents that way your enemies suffer a -1 hit against you with shooting, as well as a grenade launcher for obvious reasons. Now this list is all about the flaming template weapons, putting blaze and flames everywhere as soon as possible to destroy your enemy. Now this gang actually fights very defensively, and the reason why is because most of the time this gang will stay mounted on the Cargo 8 Ridge Hauler to move across the battlefield. They're pretty much going to use this vehicle as a mobile fuel dump, taking advantage of the Promethium tank with extra defenses and also giving their flaming weapons plentiful traits. Not to mention the Promethium tank gets shot at, it actually causes a 5-inch blast template that actually blinds your opponents as well, so it adds to extra defense for your gang. At the same time, this gang will also generate D3 times 10 credits as well as D6 times 10 credits for every scenario that they participate in where the Cargo 8 Ridge Hauler isn't wrecked, and the reason why is because of the D3 times 10 for just the valuable cargo special rule, which comes with the Cargo 8 Ridge Hauler, as well as the Lifeblood of the Waste rule with your Promethium tank. So it's a nice way to generate up to 90 credits per battle. Now this gang consists of 1 support fire team as well as 1 assault fire team. Your support fire team will consist of your Pyrocaen Lord, your Pyromagir, Cinders number 1 and 2, as well as your Guild of Coin hauler. This fire team remains with the Cargo 8 Ridge Hauler at all times. The Pyrocaen Lord spams Overseer on their Pyromagir, having the champion fire their Flamer 4 times per activation to protect the Cargo 8 Ridge Hauler. Meanwhile, Cinders number 1 and 2 throw Photon Flash Grenades to deactivate enemy fighters, and your Guild of Coin hauler also fires a grenade launcher for suppressive fire by lobbing frag grenades at the enemy. You could also benefit from the Pyrocaen Lord's Overseer ability as well, allowing you to fire your grenade launcher twice if you need to. Now, my suggestion to you is to purchase a boarding plank for the Cargo 8 Ridge Hauler as soon as possible, so that way it allows for more of an offensive combat, where that way you can have your crew actually dismount the vehicle and board enemy vehicles that way. Now, your assault fire team consists of your Outcast Champion number 1, Outcast Champion number 2, and Outcast Scum number 1, 2, and 3. Now, the assault fire team can either fight dismounted off the Cargo 8 Ridge Hauler, or you can use them to board enemy vehicles from the Cargo 8 Ridge Hauler. Now, your Outcast Champions number 1 and 2 spam the Fast Shot ability to fire their 2 Flamer shots and 2 Hand Flamer shots every activations, because they have that fast shot ability. So while they may not have the Overseer ability, though, they can still pump out the same amount of flaming shots towards your enemy to suppress your enemy, set your enemy on fire, probably cause some serious injuries at the same time. Meanwhile, Outcast Scum number 1, 2, and 3, their jobs are basically to close in and finish off the survivors using coup de grace if they are able to, or just finish them off with traditional hand-to-hand combat in most cases. Now, like I said earlier, I highly suggest that you purchase a second hand flamer for Outcast Champion number 2, so that way they can fire their hand flamers up to 4 times using that fast shot ability, or if you manage to put your Pyrocaen load on this guy with Overseer, he can actually fire 8 times with his hand flamers, 4 for each set of activations, which is absolutely terrifying to think about. And the nice part is, if you do manage to roll an ammo check because of that, no harm, no foul, you got a plentiful trait for your Promethium tank, and you automatically reload, which is all kinds of awesome. So as you can see, this is what we like to call the Gastown Pyromantic Conclave Gang. It is inspired by the Gastown War Party from Mad Max Fury Road, because they all use flamethrowers, and that's exactly how this gang operates. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about the conclusion. So in conclusion, playing a Merchant Guild Delegation Outcast Gang is some of the great ways to add a lot of variety and diversity within a Necromunda campaign. That was actually one of the cool things that came out with the Book of the Outlands, that you got to see so many new gangs to be able to field into campaigns and keep things fresh, keep things interesting, and show a lot of cool different options you can actually do to make the world of Necromunda really, really awesome. At the same time, by playing a Merchant Guild Delegation Gang, you do have a lot of powerful options, and when you throw in vehicles and the equipment and weapons that it can take, you could even make your gang even more powerful as the campaign goes on. So in my opinion, pick your favorite guild, get yourself your very vehicles, whatever flavor you want to, head out to the Ashways and start to tame them for the name of your Merchant Guild and the name of Pride and Profit. Now, of course, as always, just watch out for the saltiness of the Balance Bandwagon. They're going to have a huge field day with this, screaming out grieving and overpowered and game-breaking mechanics and all that kind of stuff. But just remember, when you defeat them and they start crying about it, to enjoy those tears and use it to warm your soul. So that's good to do for those of you guys. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is valuable to us as always. Also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all the latest, greatest hobby news related to this channel. That's good to do for this one, you guys. We will catch you guys on the next one. Peace out and stay classy.